So Agnieszka Kurant is a conceptual transdisciplinary artist whose practice explores human subjectivity in our present techno-capitalist society. Kurant investigates the phenomenon of collective intelligence in nature and culture, non-human intelligences from bacteria to artificial intelligence, and the exploitation of social capital under surveillance capitalism. Quite interesting and complex. Kurant analyzes the transformation of the human and the future of labor and creativity. For the artist, the present contemporary human is a polyphonic, polychronic, assembled state of subjectivity, the result of a hybrid fusion among state of matter, natural, non-human, synthetic and manufactured, a polyphony of agency in constant state of reconfiguration. So through your practice, Agnieszka, you create installations that aim to reconfigure the experience and the knowledge of the existence. In this room, we present a body of work that were also part of the previous chapter of Espressioni di Proposition. And it's a room in which we find three body of works, the Phosphor Diet, Chemical Garden, and Arbeit and Possible. But I would like to remember you to visit also in the room 18 in order to have a complete vision of our practice, the work Conversions. So, would you like to introduce a little bit your practice, starting with this exhibition and the work presented here, and the relationship with the crowd? Christo, that was the title of the show.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. Good morning. The title of my exhibition is Crowd Crystal, and what all the works here in this room, and also the work you're going to see in room 18 upstairs, what they have in common is that they all are created through the process of collective intelligence of either molecules or humans or geological forms being a result of multitudes coming together, of people expressing their feelings in society, of bacteria and colonies of bacteria self-organizing. So I'm interested in this opposition between like individual creation that I think is a construction in the mostly Western world, because most forms in the world are a product of a collective intelligence. So from tools to languages to revolutions. And I'm exploring this collective intelligence as a way of producing works, a novel way. And I'm also looking into how crowds became assets of contemporary capitalism. So each of these works, in a way, is made by a crowd of molecules or humans or bacteria. And maybe starting with Chemical Garden. So this work is, although it looks very organic and they look like plant forms, but in reality, this is completely inorganic. These are chemicals. So these are metal salts. And these metal salts are the salts of metals that are present in computers and in server farms and in your phones. And at the same time, the same metals were present at the beginning of life. So they preceded life, just before life emerged. At the bottom of the oceans, the same metals were present, and they produced similar lifelike forms that were not life. So actually, over the past couple hundred years, many alchemists were looking into this because they observed that something like this could be grown, and they thought that this was life. So in the 17th century, first attempts of growing Chemical Garden emerged in alchemy, and I'm growing here, so I'm submerging in sodium silicate, which is essentially liquid glass. These metal salts, so salts of nickel, chromium, silver, cobalt, manganese, iron, and so on. And these colors are natural colors. I'm not using any pigments here. It just grows, and it will continue growing over a couple of months, and then starts slowly falling apart. So we recreated this one. I actually made it just yesterday. And maybe I'm going to say a few words about these works now here.
This work is the Phosphor Diet. So this and the Chemical Garden probably are also expressing some ecological urgencies. If you want to tell us something about this.
So these works are related, well, like just like Chemical Garden, you know, they are merging between digital and geological and natural and artificial, and how in reality substances constantly get reorganized from mineral, geological, biological, and how things circulate. So in this case, I was looking at factory production and how many factories, car factories, started closing, starting in Detroit and many other cities, because car production, like many other factory productions, was moved to Asia and to Africa. So when this process started and this factory started going bankrupt, the workers started visiting these abandoned factories to look for what else is left. And it turns out that when you produce cars for 100 years and you spray paint them with vividly colored paint, the paint circulates in the air and it accumulates on the floor or on the rails of the factory, and it fossilizes into various forms that create these quasi-geological formations. And so the workers named it they named it Phosphor Diet to commemorate Henry Ford, the author of the first car factory. And what I'm doing is, you know, realizing that this Phosphor Diet, this geological formation, can be cut and polished. I am collecting fragments of Phosphor Diet from different factories around the world. We're polishing them and I am assembling them into new sculptures. So each facet, each fragment you see here is from a different factory, from a different country. So it becomes a kind of impossible form. And in a way, it's this kind of, it represents my reflection about how today the entire society became a factory. I'm going to say a few words about this work now, briefly. So this is Adjacent Possible, and this work was commissioned especially for Castello di Rivoli. And the title is inspired by the work of Stuart Kaufman and the notion that he coined. Adjacent Possible means things that are also possible, that we can imagine, that can be also created. For example, we can imagine life forms based on other elements, not only carbon, existing on other planets. Or now with synthetic biology, we can imagine creating new species that don't exist yet. This work was done in collaboration with 3 different scientists. Genevieve von Petzinger, who is a really amazing paleoanthropologist, who wrote a book called First Signs, published in 2016. And she's a researcher who looks into caves, such as Altamira or Lascaux, and many other caves around the world, where these beautiful paintings that we all know were main focus of anthropology. But meanwhile, in all these caves, there were also geometric or other kinds of signs that were essentially first attempts of human symbolic communication, or could even be considered proto-writing. But they are like between 40 and 20,000 years old. And somehow scientists were not really focusing on them, but Genevieve von Petzinger analyzed them, photographed them in hundreds of caves, and she realized that there are only 32 forms that repeat in various iterations all over the world. And so, thinking about that, this is basically the beginning of writing 40,000 years ago. As you know, like writing emerged only 5,000 years ago. So it was very interesting for me to look at it. And I worked with artificial intelligence scientists, Lauren Schultz and Justin Lane, who helped me analyze this whole database of hundreds of thousands of photographs that Genevieve and her husband did in the caves of these signs. And then with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, we produced new other signs that are based on, AI learning certain patterns and seeing hidden patterns among this, in this gigantic data set, and producing other possible signs. And this is what you see here, executed on Lucerna stone, which is a local stone in Torino, and it's also, of course, a stone that was used very prominently in Arte Povera. The signs are executed with bacterial pigments. And these bacterial pigments are a result of my collaboration with a synthetic biologist with whom we inserted genes from corals and jellyfish into the DNA of the bacteria in order to change the way that they work, and so they started producing vividly colored pigments that you see that look synthetic, but they are actually natural. And that particular part is inspired by a different discovery that was made a couple of years ago when in Australia the Gwion paintings were discovered. This is a rock art that is dated about 80,000 years old that paradoxically survived because it was kind of colonized by bacteria and fungi that continued evolving inside the paint and continued developing and breeding and recolonizing the painting. So I'm recreating this process of like perpetual colonization with mutated bacteria in this case. And so obviously these works are hovering between natural and culture and between ancient technologies and tools of Paleolithic humans and artificial intelligence combined together. And the work upstairs is in room 18. It's an evolving painting connected to changes happening in society, monitoring protest movements and their expressions of feelings in their Twitter feeds. So the painting is covered with liquid crystal paint. It's not a screen, it's an actual painting, and the particles of paint are heated and by a heating system behind the painting, and so they actually, the painting changes and evolves perpetually, and you can see it upstairs, room 18.
Thank you, Agnieszka. You probably answered my question that I transmit you by brain.